WHAS 11 and the University of Louisville present Vote 2010, the Kentucky Senate Debate.
Welcome to Bigelow Hall on the campus of the University of Louisville for tonight's political debate sponsored by WHAS TV and the University of Louisville. Tonight's debate will be between the candidates for U.S. Senate. I'm Mark Hebert. I'm from the University of Louisville. I'm the Director of Media Relations, and I'm going to be moderating this debate. We also have 4 reporters who will be asking questions of the candidates. Reporters are Joe Arnold, the political editor from WHAS TV, Joe Girth, political writer and columnist for the Louisville Courier-Journal, Greg Stottlemyre, who covers government and politics for WTVQ-TV in Lexington, and Gene Burke, the anchor and managing editor for WBKO-TV in Bowling Green. The reporters will be asking questions of the 2 candidates, Democrat Jack Conway and Republican Rand Paul. Now, we do have a live audience here in Bigelow Hall. They've been asked to refrain from applauding until after each candidate's closing statement. We've told the candidates the moderator has a little bit of leeway here, so if they don't answer the questions to the satisfaction of these reporters, they'll be allowed to ask some follow-ups. And if they believe that their opponent has said something about them that they need to respond to, I'll give them a little leeway on that, too. Now, a coin toss before the debate was won by Jack Conway. He has elected to go first in the opening statement. Rand Paul had the second option and has chosen to go last in the closing. You each have 90 seconds for your opening statements. Mr. Conway, you're first.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you to the University of Louisville and to WHS for hosting us here tonight. Elections are about choices, and this one is a choice between right and wrong. As your Attorney General, I've taken on the issue of drugs and crime. Rand Paul has said that drugs aren't a pressing matter in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Rand Paul is wrong. As your Attorney General, I've looked out for seniors when people would try to scam them or take advantage of them. Rand Paul has said that seniors need a $2,000 deductible for Medicare. Rand Paul is wrong. As your Attorney General, I've taken on the pharmaceutical companies when they lied to us about the price of drugs and took on the oil companies when they gouged us. Rand Paul would not let the government hold them accountable in any way whatsoever and has even gone so far as to say that going after BP is, quote, un-American. Rand Paul is wrong. But what worries me the most is that Rand Paul is on record as saying that we haven't followed the Constitution in this country since 1937. And 1937 is not picked randomly. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the year that the Supreme Court of the United States upheld the constitutionality of Social Security. In addition to that, Rand Paul would question the constitutionality of minimum wage laws, federal law enforcement, college loans, worker safety protections, and mine safety regulations. In fact, Rand Paul would undo all of the basic protections we've had since the 1930s. Count on me to stand up for you, and count on me to stand up for Kentuckians. I humbly ask for your vote on November the 2nd.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Conway. Dr. Paul?
People have asked me if I've enjoyed running for public office, and most days I'd say yes, but recently it's turned ugly. Most of you who know me as a pro-life Christian. I won't apologize for that. I've never written or said anything to indicate otherwise. I'm disheartened that my opponent has chosen to attack my religious beliefs. We have serious problems in our country. We have to have a serious discussion, and he's descended into the gutter to attack my Christian beliefs. I believe that those who choose the politics of personal destruction disqualify themselves from consideration. I believe that those who stoop to the level of attacking a man's religious beliefs to gain higher office, I believe that they should remember that it does not profit a man to gain the world if he loses his soul in the process. If you wish to be considered for higher office, if you wish to enter into the debate, step up, cast aside these attacks on my personal religion. Jack, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should apologize. Have you no decency? Have you no shame?
May I address that, Mark?
No, we're going to move on. You'll get your chance here in a second.
All right.
Now, here's the way it's going to work tonight. The moderator will be asking questions that have been submitted by WHAS TV viewers, and by the folks here in the room. So I will ask the first question. It'll go to Jack Conway, and my suspicion is you might use some of your time to answer Mr. Paul. Mr. Conway, are you in favor or opposed to the Supreme Court decision that allows unlimited corporate dollars in the election process, and why do you hold that position? Goes to you first, 60 seconds. Dr. Paul, you will have 60 seconds as well.
First of all, I'm opposed to that decision, but I do have to answer the charges that Rand Paul made in his opening statement. You know, Mark, values matter, and I think Rand Paul has two questions to answer here tonight. You know, the president of Baylor University, before he went to college there, banned a group. He banned them because they, quote unquote, were making fun of Christianity and Christ. Why did he freely join a group known for mocking or making fun of people of faith? And secondly, when is it ever a good idea to tie up a woman and ask her to kneel before a false idol, your God that you call Aqua Buddha? Those are two fundamental questions I hope we get answered here tonight. Now, to your question, I oppose it because at Citizens United, if we don't do something about it in the United States Senate, your politicians are going to start looking like NASCARs. I mean, there's a bunch of special interest money, undisclosed, coming in here attacking me right now. I think we need to look at this issue of how does a corporation speak and make certain that the corporate special interests don't start buying off their politicians.
Dr. Paul, 60 seconds. Favor or oppose the Supreme Court ruling?
I favor the ruling. You know, Jack, you know how do we tell when you're lying? It's when your lips are moving, okay? You're accusing me of crimes. Do you know nothing about the process? You're going to stand over there and accuse me of a crime for 30 years ago from some anonymous source? How ridiculous are you? You embarrass this race. You're going to accuse me of a crime from 30 years ago? You really have no shame, have you? Do you want to discuss the issues of the day? The issues of the day. Discuss your support for Obamacare. But let's not let this degenerate into calling me names and accusing me of crimes from 30 years ago from anonymous sources. I mean, really, have you no shame?
Give you 15 seconds to respond, Mr. Conway, and I'm going to give you 15 seconds more, Mr. Paul.
He still hasn't answered the two fundamental questions. Why did he join a group that was known for mocking Christianity and Christ? Why did he join it? It's apparent from Mr. Green in today's paper that he joined it, that they reveled in sacrilege. And values matter. And when is it ever appropriate to tie up a woman and ask her to kneel before a false god that you called Aqua Buddha?
Okay, that's time. 15 seconds. Go ahead, Mr. Paul. Dr. Paul.
How do you respond to a guy who's going to quote somebody anonymously from 30 years ago that's untrue? You just out and out lie because you have nothing to stand on. Run a race as a man. Stand up and be a man instead of just calling me names.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on. Joe Arnold has the first question for Dr. Paul.
Dr. Paul, Kentucky is home to GM, Ford, and Toyota plants, as well as suppliers to those automakers. In a recent interview, you agreed with the statement that the country would be in better shape if GM would have been allowed to fail rather than be bailed out. If GM's failure, however, would have threatened the other automakers of Kentucky, Ford and Toyota, because they share the suppliers, would you still be in favor of letting GM fail and whatever effect that would have on the other automakers of Kentucky?
I would probably characterize it a little differently. I would say that nobody wants GM to fail. Nobody wants Ford to fail. Nobody wants any business to fail. And so I'm not in favor of any businesses failing. What I would say is that when the economics of it show that you are going bankrupt, that there is something to be said for organized bankruptcy. What happened and what President Obama did in this is that he stole money basically from the Indiana teacher's pension and gave it to the union workers. The teacher's pension was in what you call a bondholder that was a preferred bondholder. By the government coming in and overtaking this process and having a bankruptcy that was outside the normal bankruptcy rules, they basically took money from people who were owed money. Bankruptcy also causes efficiencies to occur. Through bankruptcy, they would have become a more efficient process. Fruit of the Loom went bankrupt in my town. I wasn't for it. But out of that bankruptcy, they became more efficient, and Warren Buffett bought them.
Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Well, I wouldn't want to see GM go bankrupt. I wouldn't want to see the auto workers in and around Bowling Green go through that. I wouldn't want to see Ford go bankrupt. I wouldn't want to see the auto workers in and around Louisville go through that. But moving forward, this is really about who has a jobs plan for the future. I have a plan. My opponent does not. My opponent's plan is he said that We're going to need to have our people get jobs with lower wages, and they need a little tough love. You know, that's not a jobs plan. Go to my website at jackconway.org. Look at our hometown tax credit. Estimates are to create 11,000 jobs here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Joe Girth, question for Mr. Conway.
Yes, General Conway, part of your job as Attorney General is to intervene on behalf of Kentucky citizens when utility companies ask for rate increases. But at the same time that you were doing this, you were also accepting contributions from people tied to some of these same utilities. The Executive Branch Ethics Commission cleared you of charges, but some would still argue that it was not smart politically to do this, and it also doesn't pass the smell test. How can voters be sure that you are going to be representing them instead of the utilities?
Well, the proof's in the pudding, Joe. The fact of the matter is that since I've become Attorney General, I have saved the ratepayers of this state well over $100 million and opposed the recent increases for LG and KU and AEP. And so I've stood up for the ratepayers of Kentucky, and I've stood up for electricity rates in Kentucky. I've opposed cap and trade, and cap and trade is now dead in the United States Congress, and I'm glad to see that. But when the administration went forward and tried to do it administratively, I actually stepped up and filed a lawsuit against the EPA to make certain that they wouldn't do that. But, Joe, back to your original point, the Ethics Commission did take a look at this issue. They dismissed it. These have been scurrilous charges that are brought back up by Karl Rove and all this special interest, undisclosed money coming in from out of state, pursuant to the Citizens United decision, and trying to attack my character. And the fact of the matter is, whether it's on taking on the pharmaceutical companies, keeping our utility rates low, taking on the oil companies that gouge us at the pump, I have an outstanding record as Attorney General that I'm very proud of.
Dr. Paul, 30 seconds.
Actually, it was Lieutenant Governor Dan Mongiardo who brought up these charges, your fellow Democrat, and he thought they were serious. He wasn't cleared of the charges. They just said they didn't have jurisdiction over the charges. It is a clear conflict of interest for him to have been taking this money while deciding the cases. It is very important. It is something that should be brought up. And I think really he hasn't completely explained himself on this.
You good, Joe? Greg Stottlemyre, question for Dr. Paul.
Dr. Paul, your supporters gravitated to you because you were seen as a straight shooter, not a typical politician. Yet you've been accused during this campaign of backtracking from comments you've made about Kentucky's drug problem to the national sales tax to a Medicare deductible. What do you say to those who believe you've changed to get elected?
Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. A lot of my positions have been characterized by those who oppose me in two of the main newspapers in the state, so take it with a grain of salt. I've not changed any of my positions. I believe the bank bailout was a mistake. I think that our problem is a spending problem, not a revenue problem. I've said repeatedly throughout a year and a half, I favor many different tax reforms that would simplify the tax code as long as they lower the rates on everyone. But I've also said priority needs to be given to balancing the budget. It's a spending problem, not a revenue problem. I don't think we've changed on any of this. My position on drugs was mischaracterized from the very beginning. I said that where drug funding comes from was not a pressing issue, but I never said that drugs weren't a pressing issue. I'm a physician, a father of 3 teenage boys. I'm very concerned with drugs, and I've gone around the state, talked to sheriffs about it, as well as visiting drug rehab programs.
Hey, Jack Conway, 30 seconds.
Yeah, as best I can tell, Rand Paul has had to backtrack from his position on civil rights, the 23% national sales tax, whether or not he made up 1,000 phantom dues-paying members of Kentucky Taxpayers United, his stance on federal mine safety laws, the $2,000 deductible for Medicare, whether or not drugs are a pressing issue, which he clearly said drugs are not a pressing issue, and 234 supposed dead agricultural recipients in Florida that he just made up. Rand, here's the thing. You don't have the guts to stand by your positions, because once you get out there and put them out there and you realize you can't sell them and get elected on them, you step back from them. You told me to stand up and be a man. Have the guts to stay by your positions.
Okay. Gene Burke, WBKO TV, question for Mr. Conway.
Mr. Conway, if elected, what specifically will you do in your first 100 days in office to jumpstart the economy by creating jobs in Kentucky?
Well, I think jobs, Gene, are the number one issue in the Commonwealth right now. We're at 10% unemployment, and families are literally being ripped apart. I mean, parents are losing their jobs. They're afraid that they can't educate their kids. And so that's why it's so callous when my opponent says that sometimes workers just need to take lower wages and just have a little tough love. That's no jobs plan. I actually have a jobs plan. Go to our website at jackconway.org. It's called the Hometown Tax Credit. I'd cap the program at $30 billion. And for small and medium-sized businesses that want to create a new job, they can take a 20% tax credit. Now, it's not going to solve all of our problems, but estimates are that it would create about 11,000 jobs here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I also want to get the small and community banks lending once again to the small and medium-sized businesses, because George W. Bush and Mitch McConnell, when they were there, bailed out a bunch of big banks up on Wall Street.